Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Believe in Bengal podcast. Yours truly, Solomon Wilcots here. The Cincinnati Bengals are rolling into week 3 of the preseason just before we're set to take on the Indianapolis Colts in the final preseason game. Boy, we can't get through this game fast enough. All right, plenty to talk about here on the Believe in Bengal podcast. But first, let me tell you about Bet Online. Of course, it's the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything to bet on football, from preseason NFL games to college kickoffs. And of course, Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are still being played. Think you know your stuff? Now you can get in on our winner-take-all $300,000 NFL Survivor Pool for the upcoming 2024 season. And when the game is over, just head on over to our online casino and get in on the game of blackjack. You can play poker. You can even unwind with one of our over 150 slot games as well. Now head to the website today and use the promo code BELIEVE, B-L-E-A-V, and get in on the action. Bet Online, the game starts here. All right, everyone. Look, we've got to talk about our Cincinnati Bengals because I feel pretty good. I know, preseason games, we haven't won one. They're not meant to win. They're meant to get your guys on and off the field, get them some good work, show some improvement, allow the young guys to kind of show you what they can do. The fact that we've been able to get Joe Burrow into these games with our first group of offensive linemen and our first group of receivers, and when they played, they looked good. When our defensive played, the number one group, they looked really good. And you want to get them in and out of there without guys getting hurt. And we've been able to get that done. And so I think it's been a great success. Even in Chicago, where the number ones got a lot of work going up against the Chicago Bears during the week, during the joint practice sessions, but yet we held them out of the game and we got our backups into the game to let them play. With mixed results, by the way. If you listen to many of the coaching staff, they'll tell you that many of those players playing in those games were from roster positions 53 through 90. Did they play great? No. Did they give up a lot of plays? Yes, they did. And that's what I think when it comes down to getting to the final 53 players on the roster, easier decisions made this year than, say, that were made in the previous years. The one thing that concerns me the most is because if I'm the Cincinnati Bengals, I'm going to get Jamar Chase paid and get him on the practice field where he can start practicing to get his chemistry and rhythm down with Joe Burrow. First of all, you got to pay Jamar Chase. We all know he deserves a new contract. But if you pay him this year, that number is going to be less than if you wait to pay him next year. The price for wide receivers, unless you're just not paying attention, the price is going up. This time last year, the price for the top-rated receiver in the NFL was $30 million a year. At the time of this recording, the top price for the top wide receiver in the NFL is $35 million a year. So in 1 year, you saw it jump from $30 million a year to $35 million a year. You think it could jump to $40 million a year by the time we get to next season? Of course it can, because look at the plays wide receivers are making. In a pass-happy NFL league, what you have seen as we have gone from a traditional running NFL league to a passing league, of course, the quarterbacks are going to get their money. But outside of the quarterback, say 15, 20 years ago, outside of the quarterback, the highest paid player on offense was the running back. But then there became this thing about running backs being obsolete. In fact, you go back and look at last year, even the last 3 to 5 years, every single team in the NFL threw the ball on more plays on offense than they actually ran the ball. You go back 10 years ago, it was the opposite was true. More teams were running it than they were throwing it. Now teams are throwing it far more than they're running the ball. In fact, Cincinnati Bengals are almost 65-35. It might be even higher, to be honest with you, as much as we run out of shotgun and we're throwing the football almost 70% of the time. So who's the next best player after Joe Burrow in our offense? It's Jamar Chase. Bet your bottom dollar on that one. Even Mike Brown has said so. He is next in priority. So if he's that much in priority, why are we twiddling our thumbs? Why are we not getting this man paid? I'm going to tell you, pay him now and it'll be cheaper. Wait and drag this thing out into next season. It's going to cost us more money. Do the right thing. It's not about just doing the right thing. It's about doing the right thing at the right time. I'm urging the Cincinnati Bengals to end this nonsense. Let's get Jamar Chase paid. Let's get him in camp. Let's get him on the practice field, get him working out so that we can hit the ground running and avoid that 0-2 start that's kicked us in the tail each of the last 2 years. All right, we're taking a break. When we come back, we're going to be joined by a very special guest as we're going to talk about some of the training camp battles taking place with the Cincinnati Bengals when we come back to the Believe in Bengal podcast right here on Bally Sports. So right now, we're joined by my good friend, Charlie Goldsmith of Cincinnati Inquirer.com, joining us on the show. Of course, he covers the Cincinnati Bengals on the daily. Charlie, good to see you. How you been doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Hey, look, I'm doing great. And I can tell you right now, a lot of us don't quite know how to feel about our Bengals, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, because we're looking at these preseason games, and that's all they are. They're exhibition games. But when you lose them both, and then at the last sample size in Chicago, it wasn't pretty, right? 3-27. The offense couldn't score any points. The defense couldn't stop them from scoring points. What's the conversation amongst the coaching staff with the Cincinnati Bengals coming off the Chicago Bears preseason game?
The score was ugly. The takeaways, and really the most important takeaways, were positive. What this season's about, and even looking at the big picture of, going all the way into the postseason, what so much of this season is about for me, particularly on defense, is kind of this young core that they've drafted to take over. Chris Jenkins, Miles Murphy, Joseph Osai, Jordan Battle, your young corners, Dax Hill and DJ Turner playing next to Cam Taylor-Britt. I mean, those guys were on the field. The Bengals, played fantastic, really, against the Bears' first-team offense, against their starters. Now, what you saw happen in the second half is kind of the 54 through 90 on the roster. It's not even as competitive as what I've seen the Bengals have over the last few seasons. The practice squad battles aren't particularly inspiring or encouraging, and that's what's being reflected in these final scores. But we won't spend much time talking about these practice squad guys after September 1st. The focus should be on, the guys who are going to play and ideally ascend into starting roles. And those guys, improvement's the word. I don't know that they're proven at all yet, but you are seeing tangible improvement.
I want to go through maybe a few positions where I think there's some interesting battles. But I really think it's a good thing for the Bengals because it shows that they're going to have some depth at some very important positions. I want to start at the wide receiver position. Obviously, Tyler Boyd has moved on. And so the Cincinnati Bengals are looking for someone to be very consistent as their number 3 receiver. I think even the 4th and 5th receiver is going to, at some point in time, factor in. But let's talk about Andre Yosivas. Let's talk about Trenton Irwin. And obviously, Jermaine Burton. Help us to figure out how you might see this sort of shaping out in the depth chart. Who's going to be penciled in, first of all, as the number 3 guy? How do you see this kind of shaping up?
So when they announced the starters running out of the tunnel, my expectation is it's going to be Andre Yosivas listed as a starting wide receiver. Fantastic camp specific. All you need to know about him is the fact that, when Jake Browning was fighting for his NFL life last year, he trusted Andre Yosivas on throws outside the numbers. He can do that, but then this year the coaching staff's like, we want to get you on the field. Let's put you in the slot. And his ability kind of as he breaks off his routes towards the sideline or towards the middle, his ability to create leverage and create separation, he says it's even better than I thought it was going to be. He'll continue to get those reps. But it's not just going to be Yosivas. He'll be listed as the starter, but it's going to be very specific packages, matchup-specific based decisions. You'll see Yosivas, Charlie Jones, Trenton Irwin, Mike Gesicki, Tanner Hudson, 2 tight end sets with Drew Sample mixed in there. You'll see a ton of mixed in matching to replace Tyler Boyd. They kind of see that as a positive because it's not guys pigeonholed into roles. It's kind of, platoon based on strengths, the biggest evolution of the offense.
Yeah, I could see them once they get down inside the red zone. I could see Mike Gesicki being a real red zone weapon for Joe Burrow. It looks like Joe Burrow has developed a really good sort of relationship or chemistry with Yoshivash. How do you see that sort of meshing up? Who are the guys that he feel really comfortable amongst the guys you mentioned outside of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins?
If you're just talking about a trust factor, I mean, you've got to start with the guys who are on the roster because of the trust Burrow has in them, and that's Tanner Hudson and Trenton Irwin. Certainly, I've seen the trust Burrow has in Yoshivash. But I'll say it again. Trenton Irwin's here because Burrow trusts Trenton is going to run the exact precise route and be exactly where he needs. Trenton's not an elite athlete. That's why Trenton's in the NFL. And you can say the exact same things about Tanner Hudson. I think both of them will get more snaps than you'd expect. They've already made more plays as a Bengal than anyone expected for two guys who have spent time on the practice squad. And that's because of Burrow, I think, is higher on those two players maybe than anyone else in football.
Yes, I think you got to be able to point out the fact that Trenton Irwin and Tanner Hudson have been thoroughly consistent. When Joe Burrow needs them, they're always there. Whenever you've had a game where maybe Higgins has been out due to an injury or slowed by an injury, or Chase has been out, slowed by an injury, these guys come through every single time. Like, there hasn't been a game where they've been asked to step up where they didn't quite measure up. Every single time they've been able to measure up. And Yoshivash is just going to be, I think, another player that can fit into that rotation. What are some of the unique things when it comes to Jermaine Burton? There's a lot to learn. People should understand when you're working in the slot, because you got to understand how to break off your routes. If they're blitzing, if the defense is coming, you got to make yourself available to Joe right away. So there's a lot of things you have to know when you're working inside. But how does the unique talent and skill set of Jermaine Burton fit into all of this?
So they drafted Jermaine Burton to be a long-term starter, but in the short term, they drafted him to do one specific thing. And that's when teams like the Ravens, Browns, and Chiefs, corners get up in your face. That's the type of aggressive man coverage they face or they play. Jermaine Burton's the kind of guy who can shed that and who can break down the field. He's a guy when teams double team Chase and Higgins, the vision is that Burton's a guy who will shred teams deep for deep receptions. However, just what we've seen so far is the precision, the trust, the execution, the motions, not all quite there yet for Jermaine Burton. That's why he hasn't gotten a ton of reps. I've talked to third-string quarterback Logan Woodside about this. He says it's been all about route running, the mental side, the complexity of the offense with Jermaine Burton. And then kind of going a little deeper than that, like since Yoshivash will be the starter, the Bengals have a rule. If you're not a backup, or if you are a backup receiver, got to play special teams. And Burton is barely getting his feet wet right now in special teams. And I don't see him being ready to make an impact there. Backup receivers need to do that. So, maybe it will be a little bit of an easing in period for Jermaine Burton, but certainly there's a vision there, what it could look like as he gets his feet wet.
Tremendous upside. Certainly can you talk about double team on the outside. This guy can win those one-on-one matchups against heavy man coverage, particularly when other teams are very deep and talented at the cornerback position. I did see him in Chicago. He started to return punts. So you could tell he's got his mind right and trying to find other things to do. Inside linebacker behind our starters, it looks like we've got a couple of guys emerging that continue to just show up around the ball. What's the chances of that John Batchy as well as John Mehta? You got some other guys in inside linebacker who could emerge and maybe stick to the 53-man roster.
I mean, I think you have two locks here. You got to start with Akeem Davis-Gaither, who Bengals had a bad run defense last year because of how weak they were at interior defensive tackle. So Lane Rumo's like, you know what? Let's do a little more 4-3. It actually worked pretty well. And there's a lot of examples of them trying to get or looking for packages to get Davis-Gaither on the field. Joe Bacci's a guy they've seen play well. There's your fourth linebacker. Now Muma Jongmeta, star of the summer so far.
That's right.
The way he defeats blocks is legitimate. This kid is relentless and he hustles. You've also seen he wasn't thrilled with the way he played against the Bears because some of the paths he was taking towards tackles, the speed wasn't able to quite catch up on a play outside the number. Yeah. Ultimately, what I think this will come down to, and not to make this a special teams podcast, but with the new kickoff rules, do you still need 5 linebackers? I see him competing with, say, Jalen Davis for the final spot on the 53. Davis is probably the better, more valuable player, John Meta fits a role that traditionally you'd like filled, your fifth linebacker, and he has the intangibles through the roof to be a guy you want to give that chance to. But the Bengals have a few guys they like for those final spots, and it'll kind of come down to some roster math like that, some special teams considerations to see if John Meta gets that spot.
Depth on the offensive line, as you well know, is always very important. It's going to be tested, seemed like, immediately with Mims, sort of healing up as we go into the regular season. But what about Jackson Kirkland? He seems to be a guy that can play inside, maybe outside, but he seems to be the name that's ringing out more than any of the other backup players on the offensive line.
That's exactly right. And to borrow a term from Frank Pollock, he plays salty. There's just an edge to him. And usually usually I'm more analytical looking at this kind of stuff. When I watch Jackson Kirkland, he's got a mean streak. He's got an edge. He's got a very firm, strong, well-built upper body. And that's where he creates most of his push, kind of skinnier, with his legs and doesn't have the same anchor or drive. But he's a smart player. He's consistently been in the right spots. In a training camp filled with penalties and mental mistakes by Jackson Carman and Trey Hill. Kirkland's had none of that. One more thing about him, he spent most of last year on the practice squad IR with a wrist injury. And something the coaches told me was they saw him use that time to build up his game in a very impressive way. A lot of guys who are hurt kind of fade to the background. Kirkland didn't fade to the background, and the work that he did really set him up for this success.
Yeah, and look, when you become more physical and you start to make more plays, and he's been so much more consistent throughout this training camp, and got to believe that he's going to find his way onto the 53-man roster. All right, we got to have a conversation about the cornerback position. It's top of mind for everyone. How are things stacking up? We know that Cam Taylor-Britt is locked over there. We know that Mike Hilton is penciled in at the nickel corner. But there's a lot of rotation going on between DJ Turner, Dax Hill, and even Josh Newton. How do you see all three of them are going to be on the team, but how are we going to be able to field our starting secondary? And then how does the rotation go on from there?
I don't think the Bengals have an answer to this yet. Kind of the competition's ongoing. Here's how I view it. DJ Turner, before he hit the rookie wall last year, teams weren't throwing at DJ Turner. And when I evaluate defensive backs, I like guys teams don't throw at. I think that shows a technique, a consistency, an overall understanding of the scheme that I really value. And that kind of made me give DJ Turner a head start. Dax Hill has shown consistent improvement, though. He's making plays that he wasn't making a month ago. The other day in practice, he had 2 pass breakups on third downs, or pass coverages on third downs that won the drive for the defense. The athletic, dynamic plays he's made down the field in the preseason. He kind of brings some more of that, and probably some more overall, DJ Turner's elite speed. But Dax has a more well-rounded athletic skill set. Yeah. Dax is making this a conversation. I could see it even being a rotation early in the season, kind of matchup specific, and also kind of keep that evaluation going. Definitely a good problem to be, for example, like the Ravens are kind of figuring out what their cornerback situation is going to be like. The Steelers, that's not a strength of that defense. The Browns have had some turnover there, and they're relying on some young guys. The Bengals, I like where they're at, especially because of the improvement that Dax Hill has made. And if Josh Newton's your cornerback 5, again, in a matchup-specific role, there are some things he's ready to do right now. I think cornerback probably has to be the strength of the defense for the defense to be really good. They definitely have some pieces.
Josh Newton, you like what you're seeing from him. He makes a play, but then kind of give up a play. I love the way that he competes, though.
I think the competition stuff is what's going to give him the opportunity to be on the field in certain matchups right away. But then, like against the Bears, you saw him get shredded deep and commit that pass interference penalty. That's not his game right now. That's not where he's at. But you've even seen specific third down packages where he basically comes in as a dime or a nickel corner. If it's a bigger, more physical receiver, like you saw the play he made on the slant against DJ Moore, like he's ready to make that play against $100 million receivers right now, kind of in tighter quarters because of his competitiveness, his ability to find the ball, his physicality. So against the right styles of receiver, get him in the game on third down. That's exceeding expectations for a number 5 corner. That play against DJ Moore, I mean, that's tip top against one of the best wide receivers in the National Football League, where he was targeted on that play, and still Josh Newton was able to make the play. Want to just kind of back up a little bit. Talk to me about the state of readiness
of the Cincinnati Bengals to go into the 2024 season, both sides of the ball, all three phases of the game, and get off to that good start that we know this team wants to avoid, that 0-2 start like what we saw the last 2 years. What is our state of readiness right now, Charlie?
It's been an offseason full of change in that regard. 2 joint practices, playing the starters more in the preseason, and then we've even seen more long, competitive, down-the-field drives, than I've seen in the entirety of the Zach Taylor era during camp. There's been a focus and an emphasis on building that up over the course of the offseason. For example, I'm encouraged by how I'm seeing the offensive line gel, even though kind of right tackle's been its own thing. But especially when Mims was in there too, this offensive line was ahead of where it usually is.
That's right.
Joe Burrow is ahead of where he usually is at this point of the year. I think the secondary from a communication standpoint is 50 times in a better place entering the season from a communication and execution standpoint compared to where it was. But there's one thing, his name's Jamar Chase. From a readiness in terms of the season, I'm not worried about Jamar having a great season, but you have to think about week 1 and how his lack of practicing impacts what he's able to do week 1, especially when you look at kind of the lack of communication and on the same pageness you saw in week 1 last year after Burrow missed time in training camp. That's one area I kind of have circled, but everything else has been leading to a quick start.
Yeah, the fact that we have Joe Burrow actually playing in a preseason game, that just gives you high hopes for the offense. I think getting off to a fast start, and I think they will. I got to tell you this, though, Charlie. I'm worried about our defense. Last year we gave up more big plays of 15-yard pass plays than any other team in the NFL. So far through the first 2 preseason games, we've given up 14 pass plays of 15 yards or more, tied for the most in the NFL during that same period. So we haven't seen the improvement, and I get it. We're rolling a lot of people through there. But talk me off the ledge here. Why should I feel that we're going to be better when the real games start?
I can't tell you the Bengals are going to be better when the real games start, but I can tell you that their biggest priority, even organizationally in the offseason, was making sure that wouldn't happen again. And I've talked to a bunch of Bengals players and coaches about this. They basically went through all of the explosive plays they allowed, and they said, who can we get that would prevent this? Yeah. So, for example, starting at safety, Geno Stone, his biggest strength is preventing explosive plays with the way he kind of reads routes down the field. He got a lot of, they looked like easy picks last year, but he kind of forced the receiver to go a certain way. He ended up being exactly where he knew the ball was going. That's what he was brought here to do. Von Bell was brought here to Cincinnati, brought back to Cincinnati to fix the communication that was completely out of sync last year. You had guys running the wrong way. Vaughn, maybe more than anyone in football, is going to make sure everyone's running the right way.
That's right.
For example, the Houston Texans game. I thought the safeties were okay, but that game wasn't on the safeties. That historic C.J. Stroud performance was on the Bengals being able to get no interior pass rush whatsoever up the middle. So they brought in Sheldon Rankins. When you look at the explosive runs, it actually wasn't, DJ Reed or a reflection of that. The explosive runs, so many of them were with Zach Carter or with Jay Tufele on the field. So what did? They drafted over him on the depth chart. Chris Jenkins, who's had an up and down camp, but is a better run stopper than those guys. McKinley Jackson, who's hurt, but is going to be coming back. Even depth guys like Travis Bell are just going to be better run stoppers than what they had last year. So they got all these specific pieces for a reason. Of course, bringing in new pieces, there's going to be questions about how it all fits together, but they're banking on their evaluations being right.
Better angles to the football from the secondary, and you're right, great communication on the back end. That's what helps to eliminate big pass plays and big run plays. I got to believe that the addition of Geno Stone and, as you said, the return of Von Bell goes a long way in creating an umbrella of safety in the secondary to help prevent those big plays. You cut down on the big plays, man, you go a long way into playing top-notch defense. The Bengals defense fell off big time last year. We're going to, I think, hope to see them back in the winning circle on the defensive side of the ball in 2024. Charlie, thank you for joining us. You always bring great information, my friend. Look forward to having you on again with us sometime soon, okay?
Thanks for having me.
All right. He is Charlie Goldsmith of CincinnatiInquirer.com right here on Believe in Bengal Podcast. We'll be back with more after this. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the Believe in Bengal Podcast. So much to talk about. Of course, we got that final preseason game coming up Thursday against the Indianapolis Colts. We got to take care of that business. And then we'll see you on the other side as we get ready for Labor Day and the upcoming 2024 regular season right here on Bally Sports Ohio. Join us again next time, everyone.